Hi, this is Phil Shapiro. This is my book review of a delightful and fascinating new book, The Joy of Not Knowing, by Marcelo Staricoff. The subtitle is A Philosophy of Education Transforming Teaching, Thinking, Learning, and Leadership in Schools. So the author of this book is an educator in Britain, formerly a scientist, and has now thrown himself completely into education and has come up with this very interesting book, The Joy of Not Knowing. Here are some sections of the book I pulled out to share with you so that you might have the same amount of interest in the book that I do. So this is, I think, from the foreword. The Joy of Not Knowing takes every aspect of the curriculum and school life and transforms it into a personalized, meaningful, and enjoyable experience for all. It offers readers an innovative, theoretical, and practical guide to establish a values-based, inquiry-led, and challenge-rich learning-to-learn approach to teaching and learning and to school leadership. So I work at a public library, and I'm very interested in boosting inquiry, boosting wondering. So this book speaks to my interests as a library educator, but it would also speak to almost every other educator. Here in the United States, we are trying to improve school culture, and we measure so many different things about schools, but one thing we don't measure is how disenchanted students are with school or how engaged they are. And it ought to be the goal of every school and every community to have greater engagement in the learning process. I think this book points in that direction. And greater engagement is a good of its own, but it might also point towards a way of reducing school violence. That when students are engaged in learning, that they have little reason to engage in violence because the learning process itself is so enchanting. Oh, over here, if you look in the bottom right here, the acronym JONK, J-O-N-K, Joy of Not Knowing. It's very playful. I find it an easy way of recalling what this book is all about. Here are some testimonials from the book. I'm not going to read these aloud. You can stop the video to read these. I was very happy to see that among all the different testimonials, there are some students who share their ideas about this book, and that's only appropriate. So here, on this little screen here, you can stop it, are two students who explain why they like this approach and the ideas in this book. Here's from the foreword. There's a quote from the author: "In order to learn something new, we must not know it first." Marcelo Staricoff. This book is a culmination of all that I've learned, of all the people who have inspired me, all that has fascinated me throughout my career as a primary school teacher, head teacher, lecturer, author, consultant, founding fellow of the Chartered College of Teaching, and previous to the world of education, a research scientist. One thing I found very amusing on this page that I am sharing here, if you look over here on the right, some of the funding of his original research back in 2001, the funding for the research came from the sale of a section of runway at Bristol Airport in England. So I don't know who buys a section of runway and what do you do with a section of runway, but it is very amusing. Here's from the introduction of the book. The Joy of Not Knowing, JONK, is an innovative philosophy of education that enables all individuals to flourish by creating the conditions that remove the worry and anxiety usually associated with not knowing. This is really interesting stuff. So this is a way of being and a way of life for school that usually we think about knowing as a joyful act. When Archimedes, there's the proverbial Archimedes aha moment when he discovers buoyancy. That's a joyful moment. But there can be joy in not knowing. And there's joy in not knowing if we choose that to be the case. The whole of the JONK approach was developed to stop this from ever being the case for learners, that the approach achieves it by always making the learner feel comfortable with uncertainty, as they realize that uncertainty is not only a prerequisite of new learning, but also something that they are equipped to overcome, even if it's sometimes we are in situations where uncertainty seems to be the only certainty ahead. So I also like there's many different quotes of other thinkers in the book. Here's a quote from Sachs in Unsafe Thinking, and then he quotes Edward de Bono, a thinker who I really admire with his different hats of creativity and thinking. Here's a quote. The chapter illustrates how philosophy can be used as an integral part of the daily routine to create learning environments that function as collaborative communities of inquiry, so that it becomes a philosophical question. So Socrates would love this kind of book, right? Socrates would love this book, as do I. And then I liked, since I work at a library, I liked the use of the awareness of how words define our culture. The value of introducing a distinct set of words for each of the areas of the school's culture of learning is their potential to help the school to develop a common language. So that is interesting. It's interesting and needed. We must have better use of words to define our school cultures. Here's a section about using humor to build confidence. The 6 thinking hats, right? That's de Bono. I didn't know that de Bono has written a new book, I'm Right, You're Wrong, 2016. I've read so many of his other books, but I love de Bono. Many people who are educators and others are big fans of Edward de Bono. And then over here, the Philosophy Files is a great resource for these questions. The stories in this book never fail to inspire children and practitioners with a love. So I'm not familiar with that book, and I have a college major in philosophy. I should maybe I should read this book, The Philosophy Files. The book has lots of references here, and you'll see Edward de Bono's books and others. So you can stop the video if you'd like to just peruse some of that. If you'd like to see some more book reviews, I have collected my book reviews, about 60 or 70 of them, sites.google.com/site/Phil Shapiro book reviews. Here's my contact information. And as I was doing this book review, I got to wondering whether there might be any songs, any music that deals with issues, topics of wondering. And I did. I found some interesting stuff. I wanted to share it right here with you. So Cat Stevens, Yusuf Cat Stevens, had a very interesting song back in the 1970s, I believe, early 70s, On the Road to Find Out. Here it is on YouTube. Let's listen to a little bit of it. So this is all about inquiry.
Well, I left my happy home to see what I could find out. I left my folk and friends with the aim to clear my mind out.
So you can look that up yourself if you're interested. Just look at, I search YouTube On the Road to Find Out, and then the cover. Cover means it's not the original musical artist, it's somebody else. And then I got to wondering whether this same song might be played on other instruments. That's what happens when you read a book about wondering. You end up wondering a lot. I found this one that's really neat. On the mandolin, same song.
Home to see what I could find out.
She is so talented as a musician and singer over here, Mimi. So you can search for that if you're interested. And then I got to wondering, I play the ukulele. So maybe I could play the song on the ukulele. It doesn't sound like it's all that complicated. So I have my ukulele. I happen to have it right here, right beside me. Let's give this a quick little try. I have what's called a baritone ukulele. It's tuned the same as a guitar, the bottom four strings of a guitar. Well, I left my happy home to see what I could find out. Baritone uke, I love it. So there you have it, my short video book review of The Joy of Not Knowing. I commend this book. Please ask your public library, your school library to buy a copy. You might want to give a copy as a gift to a friend who is a teacher, a librarian, a school superintendent, a school principal, a head teacher. This book is a very interesting book. I was very pleased to find out about it. Until next time, this is Phil Shapiro.